There is growing concern on Capitol Hill about a potential confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. In a letter to President Trump, 4 Democratic senators have accused him of inflating threats and bending intelligence on Iran. Joining me now is one of the Democratic senators who wrote that letter, Senator Jeff Merkley. He serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for being with us. Let me just read from that letter. We are concerned above all that these assessments fit into a larger pattern of inflating threats and bending intelligence to justify dangerous, predetermined policies. To be clear, you haven't seen the intelligence yet.
Have not seen it yet. We'll see it next Tuesday.
What then is the president bending?
Well, what we're seeing is a question of who's provoking whom. Because we have the situation where we left the JCPOA, the international agreement that was negotiated. We designated the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. We cut off their oil by eliminating the waivers for Japan and Korea and China and India. We have moved a carrier battle strike group into the Persian Gulf. We've moved a bomber squadron into the region. We've consulted with Iraq to say if something goes wrong with Iran, don't worry too much. All of this is very provocative. And then the administration says, hey, look, they've put some missiles, because they've said this with the public, they've put some missiles onto some commercial boats. Iran is provoking us. And so you can see that this dynamic is one in which it's very easy to ask who's provoking whom and have some trigger. Maybe a Shiite militia in Iran attack an American and suddenly we're at war. So this is a very dangerous moment. And so to take this intelligence that they're putting missiles onto a boat and convey it into Iran is preparing to attack us is a big leap.
You heard the president just there in that soundbite say, I hope not, when he was asked whether the U.S. would go to war with Iran. We've also had reporting that the president's frustrated that his advisor, specifically John Bolton, may be pushing harder for confrontation than he would like.
Yes, and John Bolton is responsible for the worst foreign policy and security decision of the last century.
He was involved with that.
Very, very involved, and very involved in misrepresenting intelligence regarding Iraq. And so there's kind of like, this is almost a replay of a bad movie that led to enormous security problems with Iran having access, a kind of an arc of influence that extends into Syria and Lebanon, and not having the kind of the natural resistance for Iraq next door. So here we are, the same man who wrote an article saying bomb Iran, who looks at everything with the kind of the hammer of force rather than diplomacy and allies. So this is a situation. We don't have allies with us.
Are you actually suggesting that John Bolton is trying to cause a war with Iran?
John Bolton would very much like to go to war. He wrote and has said multiple times, look, Iran will never stop their nuclear program. The only way to respond is to destroy it. He sees the world and he says, I don't want negotiations, I want bombs.
I've read all this and I know what he says he wants. I guess my question to you is, do you see actions where you believe he's trying to cause that?
He is certainly setting the stage where it could happen. And that is what is very dangerous. And I think if the president really is reacting to that and saying, I'm not okay with how this is going, this is not what I want, I'm glad to hear that, because that's important. I never would have expected it would be President Trump who was putting out the caution flag. But he's got really the individual advising him in that inner circle who has one vision, and he would like to see bombs dropping over Iran.
I want to ask you about immigration, which I know is an issue that you care deeply about and have worked on very hard over the last several years. There's a story in the Washington Post today about the president's involvement, micromanaging construction of the wall. The Post says the ballers, or slats, as the president prefers to call them, should be painted flat black. That's what the president wants. A dark hue that will absorb the heat in summer, making the metal too hot for climbers to scale. Trump has recently told White House aides, Homeland Security officials, and military engineers. And the tips of the ballers should be pointed, not round, the president insists, describing in graphic terms the potential injuries that border crossers might receive. How do you assess the president's apparent micromanaging of this?
Well, I'm less concerned about him weighing in on the paint than I am about him trying to make it impossible for folks fleeing persecution to seek asylum in the United States of America, which is part of the plan that he laid out. He said, we're going to charge them fees. We're going to keep them locked up. I mean, there's a whole kind of tradition in America of treating people with respect and decency who are fleeing persecution. That doesn't mean they're going to win their asylum hearing, but whether they stay in the U.S. and win asylum or leave, they should have the experience of being treated with respect and decency while they're here. And the president is heading the other way.
The president unveiled part of a legal immigration plan yesterday that both Democrats and Republicans say is dead on arrival. One of the problems that many Democrats have is it doesn't bring up the Dreamers at all. I get that. Leave that aside. If it did bring up the Dreamers, are you open to a discussion, though, that would somehow change the ratio between what the president calls merit-based immigration and immigration based on family connection? Is there any room there in your mind as a Democrat to change the ratio?
If we go back to the 2013 bipartisan deal that went through the Senate, won supermajority support, there were a lot of compromises on both sides. And so, but that's in the context of a serious intention to address some really big issues in our broken immigration system. And so when the president's ready to have that conversation, which he's not, then let's address it. Meanwhile, we have a horrific situation with children. We have over something like about 13,000 migrant children locked up in prisons across the United States. This is unbelievable. If this was happening in Canada, we'd be doing resolutions saying, Canada, what happened to you? You're massively locking up migrant children. And now the president's working very hard to establish a vast system of internment camps for migrant families. We need to keep bringing this up because this is not America. America is better than this.
I have to let you go here, but when are you going to endorse in the Democratic presidential primary?
I'm really enjoying pushing all of the candidates to take on democracy reforms, to take on the bread and butter challenges of housing and health care and education and infrastructure, and I'm going to keep pushing them all.
That's not an answer.
Climate.
You're dodging the question.
Yes.
You're dodging the question.
I am indeed.
Senator Jeff Merkley, great to have you here with us. Thank you very much.